And I just really believe in the promise of kids and families. And I think the more that we get into these really effective learning environments, the more they're going to demand. And I think kind of like any customer service industry in some ways, like demand is not static. Like the better you do, the more parents expect.
Open your eyes, your mind, your heart. Let's have a school choice conversation. Open your eyes.
Welcome to Choice Conversations. I'm Paul Dauphin, Louisiana Director for the American Federation for Children, and joining us today is Kenneth Campbell. Kenneth is the Chief Executive Officer for New Schools Baton Rouge. Ken, welcome to Choice Conversations.
Yeah, Paul, happy to be here. And I always enjoy getting an opportunity to talk to you. Appreciate the work that you and your team are doing for kids in Louisiana every day. And so, in a lot of ways, this is a conversation amongst old friends about really important stuff and how it affects kids and families in our state.
All right. Well, a lot of us know your background, but for those who don't, give us the Cliff Notes version of how Ken Campbell progressed from being a captain in the military to now CEO of New Schools Baton Rouge.
Yeah, it's interesting, Paul. So last year was my 30th year working in education reform and parent choice in some sort of capacity. Like a lot of my friends right out of high school, I opted for the U.S. Army. So I spent 8 years active duty. Fortunately, 4.5 of those years were in Europe, which was a lot of fun. But, coming out of that, I went to Washington, D.C., came back there after being stationed there, and really had an opportunity to start to understand some of the challenges with urban education, and got into it and just kind of fell in love with the idea that, private sector organizations can help to support schools and communities improve. And so it's been a real fun experience since then. And along the way, Paul, I've had chances to do this work, not just in DC, but Boston, overseas in the Middle East, where I was for 3.5 years. And here in Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. And so, I feel like we've done some really good work. We've done some fun work and really pushing this whole idea of choice, accountability, and autonomous schools as a way to improve education.
So tell us a little bit about New Schools Baton Rouge in particular.
Yeah. So I started New Schools. I started with New Schools for Baton Rouge as actually a board member. So when Chris founded the organization 10 years ago, I was one of a small cabal that just kind of really, sat around in homes and talked about whether what we were talking about doing in Baton Rouge made sense compared to what happened in New Orleans, right? To say we can't allow educational improvement, especially bold and urgent educational improvement, only be possible after a natural disaster. And so that's kind of how we started New Schools for Baton Rouge, based on that. And I've watched the organization grow as a supporter for those 10 years. And then in March, I had an opportunity to lead the organization and happily accepted, and I've enjoyed every bit of it.
One of the things that New Schools Baton Rouge does is you have an enrollment system, an enrollment process similar to what New Orleans has with one app. Can you talk about Enroll BR, the calendar and the process?
Yeah, so Enroll BR, so this year, really exciting. We have more than 3,000 applications through that system, and they allow for select charter schools in the city, some of the charter schools, to opt into a system that allows parents to do one application that would be applicable to any school. So Paul, when you have a system of choice and you really want parents to be active in choosing, I think we have to make it easy for them to choose. We can't have a system where parents have to go to every single school, pick up a separate application, get in a lottery, and hopefully get accepted on all different timelines for different schools. The more we could streamline that, I think the better it's going to be for parents. And I think those of us who really support parental choice as a driving factor in educational improvement and in ensuring our kids can get into great schools, should be really supportive of ways to allow parents to access all those schools and increase equity.
So when does that application process start? This
So
obviously would be for next school year.
yeah, so we're getting ready to get started in October, and we'll run from October through June, like we did this year. And again, we're looking for even more families this year than we had last year.
The landscape in Baton Rouge, especially when we talk about choice, we're talking increasingly about the growth of charter schools.
Yeah.
How do you view that K-12 landscape right now?
So I think it's an interesting mix, Paul. Right? I think we have helped to spur some really strong schools here. Many of them are just getting their footing, but we're excited about the initial results and how they're doing. I think the district is also working to improve, and so you have this, really nice mix, I think, of traditional public schools and district schools. I mean, traditional public district schools and charter schools. And I think over time, what you'll start to see, Paul, is that those schools that are really taking care of our families and taking care of our kids continue to grow in enrollment, right? So that's a big important factor. Our schools growing, our parents increasingly choosing them. And then at the same time, we can look at performance and, kind of work with, district officials, state officials, and even ourselves to say, how do we respond to schools that aren't living up to the promise yet? At the end of the day, making sure that there's an excellent school available for every child is our most urgent priority. And we get up every day thinking about that. We think we have a good, strong partner in the superintendent. We're not always eye to eye, but we're also, I think, all committed to the same thing. And I think we're going to do some great work together with him also in the future. So stay tuned. I think we might have some exciting things on the choice front that we might be able to do together.
Well, looking forward to that. And speaking of especially in particular with choice and charters and Baton Rouge and the new superintendent, the new administration there, how are they with chartering, approving and authorizing charters in Baton Rouge? And for those who aren't acclimated to how charter schools are approved, but you can have the state can authorize charter schools or the school district can authorize charter schools. And in recent history in different school districts around the state, school districts have been reluctant to authorize charters. So where are we in that realm in Baton Rouge?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag, Paul. There are certainly schools that we would have liked them to approve that they haven't approved, but they've also, been really progressive in approving some schools along the way. So approving the first school for Basis, which is a corporate charter partnership with Women's Hospital, was huge. Approving Idea Public Schools has a great reputation in Texas. I had the pleasure to be the person who helped to lead Idea into Baton Rouge, getting Great Hearts approved. I think our district has been one of the best local authorizers that you could ask for in the state of Louisiana, but it's not easy for them, right? And there are certainly schools that we would have liked to see them approved that they haven't. But so far, I think we are thankful for all that they approve. We continue to try to push them further, and at the end of the day, I think try to make sure that we have schools that they approve that they're very proud of, right? Whose success they could tout as in part their success. So that's really what we hope to be able to do: create those kind of win-wins, Paul, that work for the district also.
And you mentioned just now pushing the school district. And one of the things, and I remember one of the previous superintendents in Baton Rouge was very concerned about the competition coming from charters. And basically he told their board that this is going to push us. And is that part of the equation, how choice pushes improvement overall?
I think it is. A big part of this is, what do parents want, and how are schools serving families? Like, I think that has to be our overriding consideration, much less about, kind of what title is on the school or what we call it is this a great place for kids? And it's a place that parents increasingly seek out and say, I want to be a part of this. I think the district is, under Superintendent Narcisse, really looking at some new and creative programming to try to ensure that that parents want to stay in their schools. And I'm just hoping, Paul, that across the board, we get just the right mix of performance so that every child has not only access to an education, a quality education, but access to an education that fits them, in their interests and their needs. And so, whether the district does it or whether, it's a charter, we just got to get about the work. And so I'm hoping that we don't get caught up in those kind of debates, Paul, and that we really just get an opportunity to create and sustain great schools.
And that's one of the kind of debates that goes on
All the time.
Yeah. And your neighbor, south of Baton Rouge, or west or east or whatever direction New Orleans is from Baton Rouge. People point to, well, New Orleans is an all charter district. Is Baton Rouge going to be all charter? And it sounds like from what you're saying, that is not necessarily the goal.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily the goal, right? First of all, we unlike New Orleans, which of course had to rebuild after a hurricane, we're in a position where we actually have some really strong, high-performing traditional public schools. Some of those schools at some point might want to become charter schools, right? Our law in Louisiana allows schools to do that. And we may have more schools want to take that opportunity. But for us, I think the biggest thing is, kind of what are we doing about schools that fail to perform, whether they're charter schools or traditional public schools, and what does the intervention look like? And if we have to go in and make tough decisions about those schools on accountability purposes, what are we replacing it with? And how do we ensure, again, that it's launched with an idea towards greatness and sustained greatness over time? So I don't know that we'll get there, Paul. I doubt it. I wouldn't say that it's a goal to be all charter as much as it's a goal to ensure they're all excellent schools.
All right. Well, let's turn to the news. In the news, big post-pandemic stories here in Louisiana. A couple of them. One of them is the K-12 education learning loss.
Yeah.
Where are we on that?
Scores, came out a few weeks ago, Paul, and I think it was encouraging, right? It certainly showed us that we were beginning to make up some of the ground that was lost during the pandemic, right? And so, we're able to look at the percentage of kids who were achieving mastery in 2019, and you kind of had dips in 2021. But in 2022, we saw some improvement. I think we've made roughly half of it back. But we still have a long way to go, right? We're far from where we need to be. And even before the pandemic, right, it's important to know that we were already at a very low place. So I think in this most recent round in Baton Rouge, on average, 25% of kids achieve mastery. We need to continue to increase that number rapidly. And I think that's where I'm hoping that all of our time and energy and focus is located. But kids are starting to make up ground, right? Starting to recover. And that's exciting.
And for the uninitiated, what exactly is mastery? Because it sounds, when you say mastery, it sounds like, hey, that's the top rung.
Yeah, that's not the top rung. So it's second from the top rung. But I think, our state has defined proficient as kids who achieve mastery level performance. And so we have a number of performance level, right, ranging from unsat, approaching basic mastery, and then ultimately to advanced. And so, increasing that percentage of kids who achieve mastery is where most of our focus is going to be. And until we get to, well above 50% of our kids at mastery, we're not going to have the kind of performance that we need so that we're creating kids who are really going to transform not just their communities, but the world overall. So, kind of this quest for mastery, I think, is exactly where our focus needs to be. And we don't have enough kids there yet.
Another big story is this issue, and it's really expanded after the pandemic, during and after the pandemic, is truancy.
Yeah.
Basically, we've got a lot of kids who aren't showing up at school. And, two big questions. We know the pandemic spurred it, but why hasn't it abated? And two, where are they?
Yeah, I think those are all good questions, Paul. I think if I knew the answer to that, I'd probably be I'd be able to help people out a whole lot. I will tell you, right, from running a school for half of the year last year, attendance was way down, right? I do think that there's something associated with people during the pandemic having more flexibility to where now it seems like that urgent imperative to get every child in school every day is not as strong as we need it to be in our families. And so it is probably one of the biggest factors in why we only have 25% of our kids achieving mastery, right? We know the correlation between strong school attendance and academic performance. And so the best thing we could do to increase school performance overall is to just get more of our kids in school every day. And Paul, my experience last year was that it's not just a high school phenomenon, right? The kids who are disappearing is probably a bit of a high school thing, but the low attendance kind of transcends all grades. And so, working to ensure that we get every child in school every day is really important here. And we've talked with the superintendent and I think some of our allies, and one of the things that we're actually contemplating is a campaign, right, to one, inform parents more about the importance of attendance, but also to encourage them every day to really get their children in school. If we could bump up those attendance rates by kind of 5-6 percentage points, it probably means a whole letter grade in terms of district performance.
And speaking of district performance, or performance in general, but in Baton Rouge, some good news. The Center for Research on Education Outcomes put out a report, I think it was back in the spring, and it shows that charter schools run by charter management organizations, are doing pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a very exciting report. And I think, Paul, we look at this and unfortunately, it's lagging data, right? So by the time they're able to do all the complex analysis that goes into this, it typically is a couple years behind. But, kind of what that report showed is that, somewhere between, depending on the grade and subject and subgroup, somewhere between, schools with CMO charters were getting, kids the equivalent of 24 to 75 more days of reading or math instruction, right? And they're able to correlate performance and kind of look at it across all the kids and say, based on how much growth these kids have, how much more extra schooling did this school provide in terms of an equivalent for kids over that year? And, when you're talking about like every subgroup really exceeding, what kids would have gotten in district schools. So whether it was Black students, poor students, English language learners, just across the board, our CMO schools showed that they were really, really making remarkable progress with students. We think it's a recipe, right? It is one, right? You combine choice for kids, choice for teachers, right? So that not only the kids and families want to be there, but the teachers want to be there, right? Very important. You give schools the autonomy so that they are making, decisions at the schoolhouse closest to the kids on how they spend their resources, on who they hire, on how they use their time, on what they teach and how they teach. And then you ensure that school has the autonomy to be able to do that year over year over year. You hold them accountable. I just think there's something about that combination of things that makes it more likely that some of our charters are going to be successful. Now, certainly it's not all, right? Paul, anytime you give someone responsibility and authority, sometimes it goes really well, sometimes it doesn't. What we have to be smart about is, when do we intervene in the school that might not be doing as well? But that CREDO report, I think, just is continued validation that, we're on the right track and doing the right things. And, parents that are choosing these schools are increasingly happy. They stay enrolled. And, we got to have more of that, right, across the board, whether it be charter schools, district schools, more schools growing, more parents excited about what's going on and committed to those schools.
All right, we will conclude, Ken, the conversation on this, your optimism about K-12 education in Louisiana.
Yeah, I think despite some of the challenges that are before us, right? And we certainly have some challenges, right? We need to pick up from pandemic loss, right? It's an issue. We certainly have challenges in terms of are there enough educators? But at the end of the day, I think our educators are brilliant. I think we have to wrap them in love. And I just really believe in the promise of kids and families. And I think the more that we get into these, really effective learning environments, the more they're going to demand. And I think kind of like any customer service industry in some ways, like demand is not static. Like the better you do, the more parents expect. That's what I'm really hoping for, right? I'm hoping they go to schools, they get such a great experience that they're continuing to push for an even greater experience for their kids in year to come. And I'm hoping that schools are going to be up to that challenge and really believe that they are. I think, we got good leadership in our state. We have, great laws in terms of choice opportunities, charter schools, the voucher program. We have strong accountability, maybe some of the most rigorous expectations for kids that any state has. I think all those things combine to paint a bright future for us in Louisiana.
Well, Kenneth, you are making it happen. So thank you. Thank you. So. And we appreciate what New Schools for Baton Rouge is doing. And thank you for joining us for this choice conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Anytime, and appreciate you guys also.
Open your eyes, your mind, your heart. Let's have a school choice conversation. Open your eyes, your mind.